The ivory invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked inside an envelope so thick and ornate it looked more like a royal decree than a party announcement. It was hand-delivered by courier, with gold lettering that glinted in the light streaming through my office window. "You are cordially invited to the Morgan Family Legacy Gala," it read, followed by the date, time, and venue: the Grand Ballroom at Morgan Tower. I stared at the card, my fingers grazing the raised family crest, a roaring lion atop a marble column. The same emblem that had been etched into every contract, letterhead, and building stone of the Morgan dynasty since my grandfather's time. A symbol of power, ambition, and ruthless legacy, and hypocrisy. They hadn't expected me to attend. I knew that much. My name wasn't even listed on the official family registry anymore, not after I walked away 5 years ago. Back then, I was the black sheep, the quiet architect with too many idealistic ideas, who refused to play politics, refused to betray people just to win favor. When I stood up to my father about ethics violations in a downtown project, he called me disloyal. "You think your name alone gives you a seat at this table?" He sneered that day. "Then earn it." I walked out of Morgan Properties and never looked back. What he didn't know was that I took my blueprints with me. The last 5 years had been a slow burn of long nights, sleepless months, and grit. I launched my own firm under a pseudonym, M. Gerben Works, and started rebuilding, this time ethically, sustainably, quietly. I didn't plaster my name across the buildings I designed. I let the work speak for itself, and apparently it had. Last quarter, M had outbid Morgan Properties on 3 major contracts, including the prestigious Northridge Eco Center. And now, the whispers had started. Who's behind M? The answer would come soon enough, but not yet. First, I needed to see them all again, one last time before everything changed. I picked up the invitation and slipped it into my drawer. "I'll be there," I whispered. The phone buzzed. Chloe, my executive assistant, poked her head in. "Just confirmed. Morgan Tower's event floor has been officially paid for by our shell company. They don't know it's us." "Perfect," I said. "Let them toast to their legacy. We'll pull the curtain back when the lights are brightest." Chloe smiled. "What do you want to wear?" I smirked. "Something that makes Savannah wonder if I married a billionaire." Savannah, my older sister, was the queen of the family's social ladder. Always perfect, always polished, and always reminding me of my wasted potential. She married an investment banker, drove a Bentley, and once laughed when I said I wanted to design affordable housing. The Morgans had always cared more about appearance than integrity, but appearances can be deceiving. As I walked into my penthouse later that night, I glanced around at the minimalist space I'd personally designed: floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick, lush greenery. It wasn't Morgan money that paid for it. It was mine. Everything they thought I lacked, I had built on my own terms. And soon, the empire they clung to so tightly would find itself in the hands of the one daughter they had dismissed. I sat down at my drafting table and pulled out the old blueprint: Morgan Tower, my final project before leaving. The irony that they were holding the gala there made the coming reveal even more poetic. I ran my fingers across the pencil marks I'd etched years ago. They thought I had no ambition. They thought I was too soft. They thought wrong. Morgan Tower was a gleaming blade of glass and steel, thrust into the Manhattan skyline like a symbol of dominance. From the outside, it was perfection. Inside, it was wrought, gilded in gold. I stepped out of the car in front of the building I once helped design, heels clicking against the marble pavement. The doorman opened the glass doors with practiced cheer, not recognizing me, not yet. That was part of the plan. The grand lobby hadn't changed. Still a shrine to excess, with 30-foot ceilings, crystal chandeliers imported from Vienna, and oil paintings of past Morgans arranged like royal lineage. The last time I stood here, my father's voice had echoed off these walls as he stripped me of my titles and position. Now, my presence here was a silent declaration. I had returned. "Name?" the check-in assistant asked politely at the event desk. "Emily Morgan," I said, watching her eyes flicker with confusion. The name wasn't on the public guest list. A man in a dark suit stepped forward. "We were told you wouldn't be attending." "Guess I changed my mind," I replied smoothly. He hesitated, but then checked the private list. I'd made sure the shell company we used had added me under my own name at the last second. My father wouldn't find out until I was already inside. "Right this way, Miss Morgan." As the elevator ascended to the 60th floor, I watched the city shrink beneath me. Each floor held a memory: my internship in the legal department, late nights drafting in the architecture wing, heated arguments in the executive suite. My whole life had been built in this tower, and now I was about to dismantle it. The doors opened. The legacy gala glittered in gold and white. Every Morgan cousin, uncle, and board member was dressed like royalty. Champagne flowed, waiters circled with canapes, and the air buzzed with wealth, ambition, and thinly veiled rivalries. I entered without hesitation. Conversations dropped off like piano keys going silent. Heads turned, whispers followed. I could feel Savannah's eyes cut through the crowd before I saw her. She looked exactly as expected: elegant, calculating, lips curled in a smirk. "Emily," she drawled, walking toward me in 6-inch Louboutins. "You actually came. I wasn't sure if you'd have the courage." "I didn't come for your approval, Savannah," I said, smiling sweetly. "Just wanted to see the family, and maybe toast to the future." She blinked. How quaint. Her husband, Blake, the walking definition of a Wall Street klitsch, appeared beside her. "Didn't know you were still in New York. We heard you moved to Detroit or something." "I've been around," I said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. "Doing small projects." Savannah laughed under her breath. "Still playing architect?" "Something like that." They turned, already losing interest. That's how it always was: dismiss me, underestimate me, and then act shocked when I didn't disappear. But tonight wouldn't end in polite exchanges. Tonight would end in collapse. I scanned the room for my father. There he was, Richard Morgan, standing beneath a giant projection of the new Midtown redevelopment plan, which he was boasting about to an investor group. What he didn't know was that Gerben Works had already acquired the largest lot in that zone. His plan was built on assumptions we'd quietly pulled out from under him. I approached a tall man near the stage: Jordan Hayes, CEO of Sterling Ventures and a strategic partner of ours. He nodded subtly. "You ready?" he asked. "Let's begin," I said. He tapped his champagne glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jordan said, voice booming over the chatter, "tonight is not only about legacy but about evolution. The future of urban design, sustainability, and ethical development has a new face." People turned, curious. My father furrowed his brow. Savannah stopped mid-sip. "And that future," Jordan said, "is being built by someone many of you already know, but never truly saw." The lights dimmed. A projection began to play on the screens above. First, Gerben Works logo, then panoramic images of the Northridge Eco Center, the Midtown Green Line Transit Hub, and the new Brooklyn Children's Pavilion. Applause started. Murmurs swelled. Gerben Works has quietly transformed New York's landscape," Jordan continued. "And tonight, we reveal the architect behind its success, Emily Morgan." Silence. Then chaos. I stepped forward. My father stared at me. Expression unreadable. "You," he said, like the word caught in his throat. "Yes," I replied. "I'm the one who's been outbidding you. The one building what this city actually needs. The one you cast out." Whispers surged. "And as of this morning," I said, now holds controlling interest in the Morgan Midtown redevelopment zone." "Meaning your plans are dead." "Ours begin now." I raised my glass to legacy and to building something better. The room erupted, but I was only just getting started. Savannah swept through the ballroom like it was her coronation. Her dress, a custom emerald silk gown, caught the chandelier light with every turn. Her laugh, controlled and practiced, floated above the room like perfume. Guests surrounded her, orbiting like moons around a perfect planet. I stayed near the periphery, champagne in hand, watching her play the room like a well-trained conductor. Nothing escaped her until I stepped into her line of sight. For a moment, her jaw stiffened. A flicker of disbelief passed through her expression, quickly replaced by a brittle smile. She glided toward me, arms open. "Emily, I almost didn't recognize you." Her voice was syrupy sweet, with just enough acidity to burn. "I get that a lot lately," I said, hugging her with the same artificial warmth she offered. She stepped back and took me in: my sleek black jumpsuit, the emerald earrings, and the quiet confidence I wore like armor. I knew I looked like success, but not the Morgan kind. Something different, something earned. "I was surprised to see your name on the RSVP," she said, sipping her wine. "I was surprised you remembered I existed." She laughed, but there was tension in her shoulders. "Well, you know how busy things have been since Dad stepped back. I've had to run most of the public-facing operations. Yes, I saw the article in Architectural Digest. They credited you with the Rivergate Tower redesign. Impressive. That hit home. Her expression faltered just enough because the Rivergate project wasn't her design. It was M. Gerbenwerk's mine. She had taken the credit for a project her firm didn't win, spun it into a PR triumph. I stayed silent for now. How's? What was it? Freelancing? She asked. Fulfilling, I replied. I work with purpose now. You'd be amazed how far that goes in architecture. Purpose doesn't pay the bills, she said with a smile too tight to be genuine. You'd be surprised. Before she could retort, a voice boomed from the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your seats, the presentation is about to begin. Chloe appeared beside me like clockwork. Everything's in place, she whispered. Savannah raised an eyebrow. Friend of yours? I smiled. My right hand. We walked to our table. I was seated near the center, just close enough to the stage, just far enough to still be underestimated. The lights dimmed. My father took the stage, flanked by my Uncle Robert and 2 family board members. They looked smug, polished, and completely unaware. They were seconds from losing control. Ladies and gentlemen, my father began, thank you for joining us for the Morgan Family Legacy Gala. Tonight, we honor generations of excellence and reveal the future of Morgan Properties. He clicked the remote, and the massive LED screen behind him lit up with the Morgan Tower logo. Beside it, the words Project Renaissance. This is the redevelopment plan for Morgan Tower and the surrounding district, he said. It will revolutionize the skyline and our brand, a multi-billion-dollar initiative. And we're proud to say it was spearheaded by our internal teams. The screen flickered, then glitched, and then the real presentation began. Chloe gave me a subtle nod from the tech table. A new logo appeared, sleek, minimalist, modern. M. Gerbenwerks. The blueprints unfurled on the screen, the exact designs for Project Renaissance, the Sustainable Housing Initiative, the Eco Sky Bridge, the award-winning green tech integrations. All of them bore my firm's name and trademark. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. And then came the final slide. Morgan Tower redevelopment, in partnership with M. Gerbenwerks. My father froze. Whispers spread like wildfire. Then Chloe took the mic. As of this morning, M. Gerbenwerks has finalized an acquisition of 62% of Morgan Properties' future project contracts through subsidiaries and shell partners. Our firm now oversees the majority design and implementation authority for Morgan Tower and the adjoining districts. My father turned pale. Savannah looked like she'd been slapped. I stood slowly, letting the room absorb the truth. You wanted me to earn my place, I said clearly, voice calm but cutting. I did, just not by your rules. The silence was thick, heavy. Then someone clapped. A ripple turned into a wave. Applause broke out, but not from my family. From the investors, the partners, the media. They saw what the Morgans couldn't. Evolution. I walked past Savannah as I exited the table. She reached for my arm. Emily, what is this? I leaned in close. The part where you realize legacy is built, not inherited. Then I walked away, because the Queen's game had ended, and the real architect just flipped the board. The aftershock from the gala hadn't settled, not in the Morgan boardroom, not in the press, and certainly not within my family. By the following morning, headlines were everywhere. Morgan Tower taken over by mystery firm who is M. Gerbenwerks, architect of change. Meet Emily Grace Morgan. That last one hit hardest for my father. He hadn't called. He hadn't even texted, but his assistant had reached out for a discussion. I showed up at the family estate not out of obligation but for closure. The gates opened slower than I remembered. Maybe it was just the illusion of time. Or maybe everything simply looked smaller now that I had outgrown their definitions of success. The living room was heavy with silence. My mother perched stiffly on the edge of a velvet chair. Uncle Robert stood near the fireplace, lips pressed in a tight line. And my father, he stood behind the grand piano like a conductor with no orchestra. Savannah wasn't there. I didn't blame her, Emily, my father said. He didn't use my middle name now. No grace. No condescension, just Emily. Like he wasn't sure who I'd become. I sat, calm, measured, not their fragile daughter anymore, but a woman who had outmaneuvered their empire. We need to talk, he began, about how I legally acquired controlling influence over your next decade of contracts. Or how Savannah falsely claimed credit for my firm's designs. Take your pick. My uncle stepped in. You made us look like fools in front of legacy investors. I tilted my head. I didn't make you do anything. You chose to ignore me, dismiss me. Now you get to live with the consequences. My mother finally spoke. Why didn't you come to us? If you wanted to return to the business, we could have found a position. I cut her off. I didn't want a position. I wanted to create something of my own. And I did. While you all were busy playing gatekeeper, I was building doors. They didn't understand. They weren't ready to. But I wasn't there for their understanding. I was there for their acknowledgement. You always treated legacy like a blood right, I said, eyes locking on my father. But legacy isn't preserved through nepotism. It's protected through vision, through action. He stayed silent. The patriarch with no more ground to stand on. I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. Inside, a proposal. Not for partnership but for restructuring. Urban Works is offering to streamline Morgan Properties into a leaner, innovation-focused development firm. You'll retain ownership, but creative and strategic control. That belongs to us now. My uncle scoffed. You're dismantling your family's legacy. No, I said. I'm saving it from irrelevance. He sneered. You've become ruthless. I leaned back. I learned from the best. There was no triumphant music, no standing ovation, just the quiet realization that their world was no longer theirs alone. As I left the estate, Chloe waited. In the car. How'd it go? About as expected, I said, sliding into the seat. They're still mourning the illusion of control. She smiled. They'll come around, eventually. I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. They'll have to, I said, because the future doesn't wait for permission. The next few weeks moved fast. Urban Works was now on every shortlist for Urban Design Awards. Invitations poured in from TED Talks to architecture summits. Investors who once saw me as the forgotten Morgan now called me for insight. Not my father. Savannah finally reached out. A single-line email. Coffee? Just us? I debated it, then agreed. We met at a quiet rooftop cafe overlooking the river, the same view we used to dream about when we were girls. She looked tired, not defeated, but stripped of the illusion she'd worn for so long. I was awful to you, she said, quietly. I thought I had to be. I nodded. You thought the only way to win was to play their game. She laughed bitterly. And you flipped the board. I built a new one. She looked down at her latte. Do you think there's room for me in that world? I studied her. For years, she had seen me as a threat. But now she looked like someone ready to rebuild, not compete. Maybe, I said. But only if you're willing to do the work. She looked up, hopeful. Because I don't hand out titles anymore. I build legacies. And you'd need to earn your place in mine, for the first time in years. Savannah smiled without calculation. Deal. As I left the cafe, I didn't feel like I'd won a war. I felt like I'd claimed my name, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the future of the Morgan legacy. 6 months later, the Morgan name meant something entirely different. Not because of my father. Not because of Savannah. Because of me. The newly renamed Morgan plus Grace headquarters towered above the skyline, a blend of sharp modernism and rooted heritage just like its new identity. Urban Works had officially merged with the remnants of Morgan Properties, forming a powerhouse that led urban innovation across the eastern seaboard. The press couldn't get enough, from forgotten heiress to real estate titan, Emily Morgan's architectural coup. Morgan plus Grace redefines the urban future. I stood by the tall windows of my executive office, watching cranes move steel beams across a site once blocked by outdated zoning laws, a problem I'd solved with my new policy team. I didn't just build buildings now. I reshaped cities, and today, I would announce our biggest project yet. The Grace District, a sustainable housing and public arts neighborhood funded by private capital and public partnership. A district where underserved families would have access to affordable living, green spaces, and job pathways. Savannah, now head of community initiatives, was leading the charge. She had earned it through late nights, public forums, and relentless research. She'd proven that she was more than charm and surname. She was grit. For the first time, we weren't rivals. We were co-founders of something bigger. You ready? Chloe asked, stepping into my office in a sharp charcoal suit. Always, I said, grabbing my tablet. The press conference was held at the old Morgan Properties site, now under full redesign. The media lights flashed. Local officials shook my hand like I was the future. Because I was, I stepped to the podium, looking out over a crowd that had once only seen me as a footnote. My name is Emily Grace Morgan, I began. And for too long, legacy has been defined by inheritance, by who gets invited to the table. But I didn't wait for a seat, I built the table. And today, I'm inviting a city to sit with me. Applause broke like thunder. My parents sat in the front row. My father's expression was unreadable, but his presence said everything. He finally understood that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. Later, as the press thinned and champagne flutes clinked in the background, my father approached me quietly. I underestimated you, he said. You did, I replied evenly. He nodded, and I was wrong. It wasn't an apology. Not really, but it was something. Your mother's proud, he added. She always was, I said. She just didn't know how to show it. He hesitated. Do you think there's a place for me to be useful? That surprised me. Not because he asked, but because I believed him. We'll see, I said. Legacy doesn't expire, Dad, but it evolves. He gave a small, rare smile and stepped back. Savannah joined me a moment later, holding 2 glasses of wine. We did it. No, I said, lifting my glass. We're just getting started. That night, I returned to the rooftop where Urban Works had first been dreamed up when I was still invisible to everyone but Chloe and myself. I looked out over the city, my city now. I thought about every moment I was told I wasn't enough, every closed door, every underestimation, and I smiled, because being forgotten was the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me the freedom to rewrite everything, not just the company, not just the skyline, but my name, Emily Grace Morgan, architect, visionary, heir by reinvention, and now undeniably the future.